Welcome to the AI animation. If you enjoy funny and creative stories like this one, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join our growing family. The Talking Tree. Who gossiped in the heart of the village of Greenleaf, there stood a massive oak tree named Old Whispers. Unlike ordinary trees, Old Whispers could talk, and not just talk quietly. He loved to gossip about everything and everyone, whether they were villagers, animals, or even the wind. One sunny morning, the villagers gathered around the town square for the weekly market. Little did they know, Old Whispers had already started observing everyone from his leafy branches. "Did you see Farmer Giles's hat yesterday, completely upside down?" he muttered to the squirrels, who chattered back in agreement. The squirrels, being natural messengers, scampered into town to spread the news, causing laughter among the children. Old Whispers didn't stop at hats. He noticed that the baker, Mrs. Pudding, had sneezed while frosting cupcakes. "Aha! She sprinkled extra sugar, I see," he whispered to a passing bird, who flew off and tripped over a cart of oranges. The oranges rolled through the market, bumping into a vegetable stall, and suddenly a tiny food fight erupted. Children squealed with delight, adults gasped, and Old Whispers laughed so hard that his branches shook violently. Soon the tree's gossip became the main entertainment. When the blacksmith arrived with a new hammer, Old Whispers commented, "Now that's a hammer with attitude." The villagers looked up, trying to figure out where the voice was coming from, only to see leaves quivering and a branch wiggling as if it had a personality of its own. Some of the braver villagers started talking back, asking questions like, "Do you think the mayor knows about the missing cheese?" And Old Whispers replied with dramatic flair, "Oh, he'll find out soon enough and it won't be pretty." The funniest moment happened when Old Whispers overheard the town's cat, Whiskers, plotting to steal fish from the market. "Oh, that feline thinks he's clever," the tree whispered to a passing crow. Before Whiskers could pounce, the crow squawked loudly, startling him and causing him to leap into a barrel of apples. The apples bounced, the villagers laughed uncontrollably, and Whiskers shook himself off, glaring at the tree in frustration. Even the mayor got involved. He climbed up to Old Whispers, trying to negotiate peace. "Please stop causing chaos," he begged. The tree, being playful, responded, "Chaos? I prefer to call it enhanced entertainment." The mayor sighed, realizing he was arguing with a tree and losing. By now, the entire village had learned to expect the unexpected whenever they walked past Old Whispers. Old Whispers' gossip wasn't mean-spirited, though. It reminded villagers to laugh at themselves, stay alert, and find joy in small moments. He would tell exaggerated stories of the clumsiest people, the silliest animals, and even the wind that once knocked over the mayor's wig. Every tale ended in laughter, leaving the villagers in stitches. By sunset, the tree would quietly rustle its leaves, pleased with a day well spent. The villagers knew that life in Greenleaf wouldn't be dull with Old Whispers around. Children hugged his trunk, adults shared jokes inspired by his gossip, and even animals seemed to enjoy his commentary. From then on, everyone agreed that a talking, gossip-loving tree was far better than any ordinary tree, and that laughter, even from a tree, was the best magic of all. Thanks for watching the AI animation. If you love this story, give it a like, drop a comment, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Next story: The Great Vampire Spa Disaster. In the heart of the dark forest of Gloomwood, there was a vampire named Vladislav, who was famous not for terror or strength, but for his obsession with relaxation. Vladislav had decided that every vampire deserved a luxurious spa day. After all, keeping one's cape shiny and one's fangs gleaming required serious pampering. Vladislav opened the first-ever vampire spa, promising treatments such as bloodbath bliss, fang-whitening facial, and cape-ironing therapy. Invitations were sent far and wide, and the spa quickly became the hottest spot in the vampire community. The spa's first day, however, was chaotic. Vampires began arriving in droves, some glittering like diamonds, others cloaked in shadows that accidentally swallowed small furniture. Vladislav greeted everyone with a smile and handed out special spa robes. Unfortunately, the robes were enchanted and tended to shrink when exposed to sunlight. Even the tiniest bit of moonlight made them expand uncontrollably. The first customer, Countess Carmilla, tried the bloodbath bliss. She sank gracefully into a ruby-red pool, only to find it enchanted with a tickling spell. Every time she tried to relax, invisible hands tickled her relentlessly. She shrieked and flailed, accidentally splashing nearby patrons. The elegant Prince Drago slipped on a stray drop of blood, landing in the fang-whitening facial section, covering himself in glowing white paste. Vladislav rushed to help, but he tripped over a rogue bottle of glow-in-the-dark nail polish, sending it flying across the room. It landed on a sleeping vampire who woke up glowing like a neon lantern, scaring the spa receptionist into fainting. Then came the hot stone massage. Vladislav, attempting to demonstrate, placed a heated stone on his own back, and the stone began rolling off like a runaway marble. It rolled into a cauldron of eternal youth mud and splashed the spa janitor, turning him temporarily invisible. Chaos was unfolding faster than Vladislav could blink. Meanwhile, the sauna was enchanted to produce soothing fog. It was meant to relax the vampires, but instead, it made everyone float slightly above the floor. The first attempt at floating meditation resulted in vampires bumping into chandeliers, one's cape catching on a chandelier hook, spinning like a carousel ride. The crowd was both terrified and laughing uncontrollably. To make matters worse, Vladislav decided to demonstrate the cape ironing therapy. He laid his own cape on the magical ironing table, but the table had a mischievous spell. It considered ironing an invitation to dance. The cape leapt into the air, wrapped itself around a group of vampires, and began a synchronized spinning routine. Everyone joined in accidentally, twisting and tumbling until the spa looked like a scene from a vampire ballet. At one point, a vampire child sneezed, unleashing a burst of sparkling mist that set off a chain reaction. Enchanted towels flew into the ceiling fans, candles toppled, and the relaxing sound of Cricket's playlist somehow started playing the Royal Marching Band instead. The spa echoed with chaos, laughter, and a few shrieks of panic. Despite all the disasters, Vladislav noticed something remarkable. No vampire had left. In fact, everyone was laughing more than they ever had. Countess Carmilla, glowing and tickled, declared, "This may be the most relaxing day of my life." Even Prince Drago, with white paste on his face, was smiling. Vladislav finally collapsed onto a massage chair, exhausted. The vampires cheered and a magical confetti cannon, installed for spa ambiance, went off, covering everyone in sparkling dust. The spa may have been a disaster, but it was also the happiest, funniest, and most memorable day in vampire history. From that day on, Vladislav's vampire spa became legendary. Not for luxury, but for laughter, chaos, and the unforgettable ability to turn every treatment into a hilarious adventure. Vampires came from far and wide, not to relax quietly, but to laugh, tumble, and accidentally glow in neon colors. Vladislav smiled, knowing that sometimes a little chaos was the perfect recipe for happiness. Thanks for watching the AI animation. If you love this story, give it a like, drop a comment, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Next story. The Misadventures of Sir Whiskers, the Brave Cat Knight. In the kingdom of Purrington, courage was measured not by swords or shields, but by whiskers. And no one had whiskers quite like Sir Whiskers, the bravest cat knight in all the land. Or at least he thought he was the bravest. Sir Whiskers had a shiny armor made of polished tin and a tiny helmet that often slid over his eyes. He rode a noble steed, well, a slightly confused goat named Mr. Nibbles who preferred eating the grass rather than galloping. Together, they were a sight to behold, or a sight to stumble over. One morning, the king summoned Sir Whiskers for an urgent mission. "Our kingdom's prized golden yarn ball has been stolen by the mischievous goblins of Gigglewood," the king declared. "Bring it back and glory and fish treats shall be yours." Sir Whiskers saluted, which looked more like a dramatic faceplant, and set off immediately. Mr. Nibbles bleated in agreement, or maybe in confusion, it was hard to tell. The journey to Gigglewood was treacherous. Sir Whiskers dodged flying pine cones, tangled himself in magical vines, and accidentally fell into a river of strawberry jam. "A minor setback," he declared, licking the jam from his whiskers. When he arrived at the goblin camp, he discovered the culprits were not particularly intimidating. The goblins were small, had glitter in their hair, and seemed more interested in juggling than stealing. Sir Whiskers, ever bold, leapt forward with a mighty battle cry. The goblins clapped politely, thinking it was part of the performance. He tried to confront their leader, Goblin Gigglesnort, who was busy knitting a scarf from the golden yarn. "Step aside, villain," Sir Whiskers demanded. The goblin simply sneezed glitter in his face. Sir Whiskers coughed, slipped on a stray banana peel, and landed in a pile of marshmallows. Mr. Nibbles wandered into the camp, chewing the goblin's shoes. It got worse. A group of goblins challenged Sir Whiskers to a duel with feather dusters. They twirled and flailed. Sir Whiskers attempted a counterattack but got tangled in his own tail. By now, everyone was slipping on marshmallows and rolling around in glitter. The battle had devolved into pure chaos. Just when it seemed hopeless, Sir Whiskers had an idea. He climbed onto a rock and declared, "I challenge you to a dance-off. Winner keeps the yarn ball." The goblins loved a good dance-off. They accepted immediately. What followed was an epic display of clumsy footwork. Sir Whiskers twirled, spun, and accidentally kicked a goblin into a pile of marshmallows. Mr. Nibbles hopped in, doing goat spins and leaps that amazed everyone. Even Goblin Gigglesnort attempted a pirouette and ended up tangled in yarn. At the end, the goblins admitted defeat, not because Sir Whiskers was graceful, but because everyone was too busy laughing. The golden yarn ball was returned, glitter-covered but intact. Sir Whiskers bowed, tripped again, and nearly fell off the rock, but Mr. Nibbles caught him just in time. The journey back to Purrington was triumphant. The king awarded Sir Whiskers a lifetime supply of fish treats and declared a holiday in his honor, the Day of the Clumsy Hero. Villagers laughed at tales of his misadventures, and the story of Sir Whiskers and the goblins of Gigglewood became legend. From that day on, every cat in Purrington dreamed of bravery, adventure, and the occasional marshmallow mishap. And Sir Whiskers? He napped proudly on a golden cushion, whiskers twitching, already planning his next heroic and inevitably chaotic adventure. Thanks for watching the AI animation. If you love this story, give it a like, drop a comment, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Welcome to the AI animation. If you enjoy funny and creative stories like this one, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join our growing family. The Heavenly Council in the Clouds. High above the earth, where the sky shimmered in endless shades of blue and the clouds formed palaces of cotton and gold, there was a place known as the Heavenly Council. Here, the great guardians of the skies gathered to make important decisions about rain, thunder, sunshine, and even the occasional rainbow. It sounded majestic in theory. In practice, it was often a circus. The council consisted of 4 main guardians. First was Solara, guardian of the sun, brilliant, radiant, and prone to dramatic speeches. Second was Nimbus, guardian of rain, gloomy, forgetful, and always carrying a leaky umbrella. Third was Zephyr, guardian of wind, playful, mischievous, and easily distracted. And last, there was Bolt, guardian of thunder, loud, grumpy, and convinced he should have been in charge of everything. One morning, the council gathered to discuss an urgent matter: the weather for a royal wedding taking place in the kingdom below. Solara wanted clear skies and endless sunshine. Nimbus argued for a light drizzle. For the crops, of course. Zephyr wanted a cool breeze to make the bride's veil look dramatic. Bolt wanted, naturally, a thunderstorm. The debate escalated quickly. Solara pounded her golden staff. "A wedding must have sunshine," Nimbus pouted. "But without rain, how will the farmers survive?" Zephyr twirled around, blowing papers everywhere. "I just want to make her veil float like a heroic banner." Bolt slammed his fist on the cloud table, sending thunder rolling across 3 villages below. "Bah! Weddings are boring! Give them lightning! It's exciting!" The argument went in circles until someone, no one quite remembered who, suggested they each try their idea for just a moment. "A weather rehearsal," Zephyr called it. The others agreed, though reluctantly. First, Solara unleashed her sunshine. The earth below blazed with heat. Guests at the wedding began sweating so much that their fancy wigs slid off. The groom fainted, and the cake melted into a puddle of sugary goo. Next came Nimbus. He summoned a drizzle, intending it to be soft and romantic. Instead, he sneezed mid-spell, and it turned into a downpour. Guests scrambled for cover. The bride's veil stuck to her face, and the flower girl floated away in a basket. Zephyr stepped in, eager to fix things. He summoned a breeze, gentle at first, but it quickly grew into a gust. The bride's veil did indeed float, right off her head and into a tree. The guests' hats took flight, turning the ceremony into an impromptu hat-chasing marathon. Finally, Bolt, grinning wickedly, summoned a storm. Lightning crackled, thunder roared, and the guests screamed. But just as chaos peaked, a bolt of lightning struck the wedding feast, roasting the chickens instantly. Strangely, the guests cheered. They had dinner ready early. The council froze, staring down at the mess they had caused. "Well," Solara admitted, "that could have gone better." Nimbus sniffled. "I didn't mean to sneeze." Zephyr giggled. That veil really flew! Bolt, however, puffed his chest proudly. You're welcome for the roast chicken. Realizing they had nearly ruined the royal wedding, the Guardians decided to work together for once. Solara softened her sun, Nimbus created a rainbow, Zephyr crafted a gentle breeze, and Bolt grumbled but agreed to keep his thunder quiet. The result? The most magical wedding atmosphere anyone had ever seen. The rainbow arched perfectly behind the couple, the veil floated gracefully, and the guests dined happily on perfectly roasted chicken. From then on, the Heavenly Council learned that cooperation, not competition, brought the best results. Though, of course, the next time they met, they immediately started arguing again, this time over whether picnics were better with sunshine or shade. And so, the sky above remained unpredictable, but always entertaining, because the Guardians in the clouds were just as human, or perhaps just as silly, as the people below. Thanks for watching the AI animation! If you love this story, give it a like, drop a comment, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Welcome to the AI animation. If you enjoy funny and creative stories like this one, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join our growing family. The pirate who lost his ship in the desert. Once upon a time, in the whimsical world of unusual adventures, there lived a pirate named Captain Sillybeard. He was famous for three things: his enormous, glittery beard, his love of treasure, and his remarkable inability to read maps. He commanded a loyal crew aboard the ship the Salty Squid, which was supposed to sail the seven seas, plunder islands, and search for lost treasure. Unfortunately, Captain Sillybeard had a rather unfortunate habit. He frequently sailed into the wrong places. One morning, the captain decided it was the perfect day for a treasure hunt. He unfurled an old dusty map he had found in a tavern. The map promised riches beyond imagination: golden coins, sparkling jewels, and a magical parrot that could recite poetry. With his crew cheering him on, Sillybeard set sail. Hours passed. The sun blazed high in the sky, and the sea seemed calm. "Steady as she goes, lads," he bellowed. However, after a few hours, the water became shallower, and the crew began to notice something strange. The waves disappeared, the salty smell faded. Soon, the ship creaked and groaned as it bumped over dry, golden sand. Captain Sillybeard squinted at the horizon. This doesn't look like the ocean." The first mate, a clever but exasperated parrot named Polly, tilted his head and squawked, "You sailed into a desert, you nincompoop!" The crew erupted into chaos. Sailors ran around trying to adjust the sails, which of course did absolutely nothing on sand. The ship, which had been floating majestically a few hours ago, was now firmly stuck in the dunes, its anchor useless, and its figurehead, a fearsome squid, looking rather ridiculous in the dry heat. Sillybeard scratched his glittery beard, muttering, "I knew I forgot something." "Oh yes, water," the crew groaned. The first mate squawked, "Captain, what about the treasure?" Sillybeard waved a dramatic hand. "We'll find it anyway, pirates never give up." Thus began the most absurd desert adventure in pirate history. Captain Sillybeard and his crew had to adapt quickly. They fashioned makeshift wheels from barrels to try to roll the ship, only for it to tumble down sand dunes, leaving a trail of splintered wood and startled camels. They dug wells with spoons, hoping to find water, finding only a few stubborn worms and more sand. The sun beat down mercilessly, but the pirate crew refused to give up. To make matters funnier, the crew encountered a desert nomad named Zahara, who couldn't stop laughing at the sight of a ship stranded in the middle of the dunes. She offered to guide them to an oasis, but only if they promised to share their legendary pirate treasure. Sillybeard, without thinking, agreed and promptly forgot the promise moments later, as he was distracted by a particularly shiny rock. Days passed. The pirates struggled with thirst, confusion, and heat-induced hallucinations. Sillybeard started imagining the ship singing to him, offering advice like, "Turn left at the cactus," and "Sand is secretly gold, just roll over it." The crew humored him, realizing that life with Sillybeard was always unpredictably hilarious. Finally, they reached the oasis, where real water glistened, and the parched crew dove in with gusto. While refreshing themselves, they discovered something extraordinary. Beneath the sand, the desert hid a secret cavern filled with glittering gems and golden coins, exactly the treasure they had been seeking, even if unintentionally. Captain Sillybeard, dripping wet and sand-covered, declared, "I knew the desert had riches all along. Pirates always find a way." The crew celebrated, laughing about their desert misadventures. They named the oasis Sillybeard's Mirage, and carved messages into the dunes to warn other pirates. Beware maps, beaches, and glittery beards. Yet, despite all the mishaps, the adventure bonded them more than any calm sea voyage ever could. When they finally returned to the ocean, the crew shared stories of the desert with anyone who would listen. The ship rolling over dunes, camels mistaking the figurehead for a rival, and Sillybeard giving inspirational speeches to tumbleweeds. Captain Sillybeard had accidentally turned a disastrous situation into the most legendary and funniest treasure hunt in history. From that day forward, pirates everywhere knew one truth. If you ever end up stranded in a desert, just laugh, keep searching, and always follow a glittery beard. Thanks for watching the AI animation. If you love this story, give it a like, drop a comment, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Next story. The beach wedding that went totally sideways. Once upon a time in the sunny kingdom of Solaria, Princess Maribel was getting married on the most beautiful beach in the land. The sand was soft, the waves sparkled, and the sun promised perfect weather. Every villager, noble, and curious traveler was invited to witness the grand event. The princess's fiancé, Lord Percival, was known for his elegance, charm, and, unfortunately, his extreme fear of seagulls. Maribel, on the other hand, had planned every tiny detail: golden arches, floral canopies, and a marching band that could play underwater, or so she claimed. The day began beautifully. The guests arrived in decorated carriages, the orchestra tuned their instruments, and the seashells glimmered like tiny diamonds in the sun. Everything was seemingly perfect until the first disaster struck: the Sandcastle Isle. Princess Maribel wanted a romantic isle made entirely of tiny sandcastles so the guests could walk over them. Unfortunately, the tide was rising. Halfway through the isle, the first guest, a particularly tall and nervous duke, stepped on a sandcastle, slipped, and ended up face first in the wet sand. The orchestra tried to continue playing, but the drum floated away on a rogue wave. Then came the seagulls. Lord Percival had warned everyone, "Do not bring fish near the beach." But the caterers forgot. The seagulls descended like a fluffy, feathery army, snatching sandwiches, hats, and even a small crown off a noble child's head. Percival screamed dramatically, tripping over a sunken sandcastle and landing in a tide pool. The crowd laughed so hard some of the noblewomen dropped their fans into the waves. Next, the wedding cake. A towering confection of 7 tiers and glittering sugar flowers, it was supposed to be the centerpiece of the reception. But a playful crab, attracted to the shiny decorations, climbed the cake and sent it toppling into the lap of an unsuspecting aunt. Frosting splattered everywhere, seagulls cheered, and the crab retreated victoriously with a cherry in its claw. The officiant, a serious man named Father Ignatius, tried to keep the ceremony on track. But when he opened the Bible to recite the vows, a rogue breeze flipped the pages back and forth. Maribel recited the wrong vows to Percival, promising to chase seagulls and eat sandcastles forever. Percival, soaked from the tide pool, shouted back, "And I shall dodge crabs with courage." By now, the tide had nearly reached the floral canopy. The guests were sliding, slipping, and laughing hysterically. The musicians abandoned their instruments and joined in the chaos, using conch shells to play off-key tunes. One brave child built a tiny raft out of driftwood, attempting to rescue the wedding rings from the incoming tide. And then, the pièce de résistance, a parrot, belonging to a distant relative, flew overhead and loudly repeated Percival's vow about dodging crabs. The guests fell to the sand laughing until tears streamed down their faces. The parrot, pleased with its performance, landed on the bride's head, mistaking her sparkling tiara for a perch. Despite all the disasters, the couple laughed more than anyone. They held hands, wiping sand and frosting from each other, and declared, "This is the happiest day of our lives." The guests cheered, the seagulls squawked. The tide crashed, the crab waved its cherry in triumph. By sunset, the wedding was legendary. Songs were written about the seagull siege, paintings captured the frosting catastrophe, and storytellers recounted how Princess Maribel and Lord Percival celebrated love in the most hilariously chaotic way imaginable. From that day forward, every beach wedding in Solaria included a warning: expect sand, seagulls, and maybe a crab or two. Laughter guaranteed, and the couple? They lived happily ever after, often reminiscing about their perfect disaster of a wedding. Thanks for watching the AI animation. If you love this story, give it a like, drop a comment, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Welcome to the AI animation. If you enjoy funny and creative stories like this one, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join our growing family. The clumsy wizard who accidentally opened a portal. In the magical kingdom of Fizzlewood, there lived a wizard named Percival, known far and wide for his spells and his incredible clumsiness. Percival could turn pumpkins into carriages, make broomsticks dance, and even brew potions that caused rainbows to fall from the sky. But most of the time, he ended up turning ordinary things into total chaos. One bright morning, Percival decided to experiment with a portal spell, intending to create a small window to peek into other lands. He drew intricate symbols on the floor, muttered complicated incantations, and waved his wand dramatically. The villagers gathered outside his tower, curious to see what would happen. At first, nothing happened. Then suddenly, a swirling vortex appeared in midair. It was far larger than he intended, pulsating with colors like spilled paint. A sheep from the nearby farm, curious as always, wandered too close and vanished through the portal with a surprised "Bah!" The crowd gasped while Percival panicked, muttering, "Oops!" Maybe a tiny portal was enough. Before anyone could react, chickens, cows, and even a very dignified goat began tumbling through the portal one after another. They popped out into random parts of the kingdom, clucking, baying, and mooing in complete confusion. The villagers ran around trying to corral them, while Percival frantically waved his wand, accidentally turning a pumpkin into a bright pink parrot that squawked, "More chaos, Percival!" The funniest part came when Percival himself stepped backward, tripped over a magical broomstick, and almost fell into the portal. He landed on a haystack instead, leaving his hat spinning dramatically in the air. The portal sputtered and hiccuped, pulling in random objects from the village. A stack of pies, a basket of apples, and the mayor's wig, which landed on a passing goose. The villagers laughed so hard they cried. Realizing the portal was unstable, Percival had to think fast. He muttered more spells, danced in circles, and even tried shouting at it, which did nothing. Eventually, he carefully reversed the portal's spell, returning the animals, pies, and apples to their rightful places, though the goat now wore the mayor's wig and strutted proudly through the town square. By sunset, Fizzlewood had never seen a more chaotic or entertaining day. Children reenacted the portal mishap in games, villagers told stories of the flying pies, and Percival, though embarrassed, took a bow. He had accidentally created the kingdom's funniest event in living memory. From that day on, Percival embraced his clumsiness. He continued experimenting with magic, always making sure the villagers had plenty of laughter along the way. The portal incident became legendary, proving that sometimes mistakes can lead to the most magical adventures. Thanks for watching the AI animation. If you love this story, give it a like, drop a comment, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one.
Welcome to the AI animation. If you enjoy funny and creative stories like this one, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join our growing family. The Wedding in Paradise. There's a saying in the kingdom of Aurelia, heaven smiles widest on weddings. And indeed, when Princess Leora and Prince Kale announced their union, the entire kingdom swore the heavens themselves would host it. The venue wasn't a cathedral or a palace, it was a place simply known as Paradise Bay. Imagine an island where the sand gleamed like crushed pearls, palm trees swayed like graceful dancers, and the ocean shimmered in shades of turquoise and sapphire. That was Paradise Bay. When word spread that the royal wedding would take place there, travelers from across the world packed boats, airships, and even carriages strapped to giant birds just to witness it. The preparations were nothing short of legendary. Bakers worked day and night to create a cake so tall it needed scaffolding. Musicians rehearsed melodies set to charm even the waves. Tailors wove gowns that shimmered like sunlight on water. The guest list included kings, queens, wizards, mischievous fairies, and even a sea dragon who promised to behave. But of course, no grand wedding is complete without chaos. On the morning of the big day, Paradise Bay woke to a scene of pure comedy. The doves meant to carry silk ribbons had eaten half the flower arrangements. The wedding band's instruments had been borrowed by a troupe of monkeys who now played terrible music from the treetops. And the cake? A curious mermaid had climbed it in the night, mistaking it for a coral tower, leaving frosting footprints all the way up. Princess Leora, calm as a summer breeze, simply laughed. "It's not a wedding without surprises," she said. Prince Kale, on the other hand, spent 20 minutes chasing a monkey to retrieve his crown, finally trading it for a banana. By noon, the chaos grew funnier. The sea dragon sneezed during the vows, sending a plume of smoke that singed the priest's hat. The flower girl tripped, sending petals flying into the guests' goblets of wine, which only made them toast louder. A wayward breeze lifted Leora's veil and carried it halfway across the bay, where a dolphin caught it and delivered it back with much applause. And yet, through it all, there was a kind of magic no chaos could dim. When the couple spoke their vows, even the monkeys went silent. The ocean hushed its waves, the palms stilled, and the sky painted itself with golden light. Leora promised laughter, Kyle promised patience, and together they promised to make their marriage as adventurous as their wedding day. When they kissed, fireworks, courtesy of a bumbling wizard, accidentally shot out early, exploding into shapes of hearts and stars. The crowd cheered, the sea dragon roared, the dolphins leaped in celebration, and even the mischievous monkeys clapped. The feast that followed lasted until sunrise. Guests danced barefoot on the sand, feasting on tropical fruits and slices of the slightly lopsided cake. The fairies enchanted lanterns to float across the sky like glowing butterflies. The sea shimmered with reflections of joy. And so, the wedding in paradise became legend, not because it was perfect, but because it was real, messy, magical, and hilarious all at once. In the years that followed, whenever couples in Aurelia married, they'd joke, "At least no dragon sneezed on us," and raise a toast to the day heaven truly smiled widest. Thanks for watching the AI animation. If you loved this story, give it a like, drop a comment, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one.
Welcome to the AI animation. If you enjoy funny and creative stories like this one, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join our growing family. The Heavenly Council in the Clouds. High above the earth, where the sky shimmered in endless shades of blue and the clouds formed palaces of cotton and gold, there was a place known as the Heavenly Council. Here, the great guardians of the skies gathered to make important decisions about rain, thunder, sunshine, and even the occasional rainbow. It sounded majestic in theory. In practice, it was often a circus. The council consisted of 4 main guardians. First was Solara, guardian of the sun, brilliant, radiant, and prone to dramatic speeches. Second was Nimbus, guardian of rain, gloomy, forgetful, and always carrying a leaky umbrella. Third was Zephyr, guardian of wind, playful, mischievous, and easily distracted. And last there was Bolt, guardian of thunder, loud, grumpy, and convinced he should have been in charge of everything. One morning, the council gathered to discuss an urgent matter: the weather for a royal wedding taking place in the kingdom below. Solara wanted clear skies and endless sunshine. Nimbus argued for a light drizzle. For the crops, of course. Zephyr wanted a cool breeze to make the bride's veil look dramatic. Bolt wanted, naturally, a thunderstorm. The debate escalated quickly. Solara pounded her golden staff. "A wedding must have sunshine," Nimbus pouted. "But without rain, how will the farmers survive?" Zephyr twirled around, blowing papers everywhere. "I just want to make her veil float like a heroic banner." Bolt slammed his fist on the cloud table, sending thunder rolling across 3 villages below. "Bah! Weddings are boring! Give them lightning! It's exciting!" The argument went in circles until someone, no one quite remembered who, suggested they each try their idea for just a moment. "A weather rehearsal," Zephyr called it. The others agreed, though reluctantly. First, Solara unleashed her sunshine. The earth below blazed with heat. Guests at the wedding began sweating so much that their fancy wigs slid off. The groom fainted, and the cake melted into a puddle of sugary goo. Next came Nimbus. He summoned a drizzle, intending it to be soft and romantic. Instead, he sneezed mid-spell, and it turned into a downpour. Guests scrambled for cover, the bride's veil stuck to her face, and the flower girl floated away in a basket. Zephyr stepped in, eager to fix things. He summoned a breeze, gentle at first, but it quickly grew into a gust. The bride's veil did indeed float, right off her head and into a tree. The guests' hats took flight, turning the ceremony into an impromptu hat-chasing marathon. Finally, Bolt, grinning wickedly, summoned a storm. Lightning crackled, thunder roared, and the guests screamed. But just as chaos peaked, a bolt of lightning struck the wedding feast, roasting the chickens instantly. Strangely, the guests cheered. They had dinner ready early. The council froze, staring down at the mess they had caused. "Well," Solara admitted, "that could have gone better." Nimbus sniffled. "I didn't mean to sneeze." Zephyr giggled. "That veil really flew!" Bolt, however, puffed his chest proudly. You're welcome for the roast chicken. Realizing they had nearly ruined the royal wedding, the Guardians decided to work together for once. Solara softened her sun, Nimbus created a rainbow, Zephyr crafted a gentle breeze, and Bolt grumbled but agreed to keep his thunder quiet. The result? The most magical wedding atmosphere anyone had ever seen. The rainbow arched perfectly behind the couple, the veil floated gracefully, and the guests dined happily on perfectly roasted chicken. From then on, the Heavenly Council learned that cooperation, not competition, brought the best results. Though, of course, the next time they met, they immediately started arguing again, this time over whether picnics were better with sunshine or shade. And so, the sky above remained unpredictable, but always entertaining, because the guardians in the clouds were just as human, or perhaps just as silly, as the people below. Thanks for watching the AI animation! If you love this story, give it a like, drop a comment, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Welcome to the AI animation. If you enjoy funny and creative stories like this one, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join our growing family. The Palace of Endless Doors. Long ago, in the bustling kingdom of Vera, there stood a palace unlike any other. From the outside, it looked magnificent. Golden spires, marble columns, and gardens so large that visitors often got lost before even reaching the gates. But the palace's true peculiarity lay within. It was filled with doors. Not just ordinary doors, mind you. Every wall, corridor, staircase, and hall had them. Big doors, tiny doors, doors shaped like animals, doors painted with scenes of battles or banquets. There were doors within doors, like puzzles waiting to be solved. Some led to dining rooms, others to broom closets, and some to places no one could explain. Servants often joked that half their job was finding their way back to the kitchens. At the heart of this curious palace lived King Eldrin, a kind but absent-minded ruler. He loved his palace but had one persistent problem. He could never remember which door led where. Ministers would wait hours for meetings only to find him stuck in a linen closet, debating policy with the mop. One day, the palace announced a grand ball to welcome visiting royals. Guests from far and wide poured into Vera, dukes, duchesses, knights, poets, even a few curious wizards. The kitchens buzzed, the chandeliers sparkled, and the musicians tuned their instruments. Everything was perfect, except for the doors. On the night of the ball, chaos unfolded almost instantly. Guests entered through the grand entrance but soon vanished through random doors. The Duke of Thornbridge opened one and found himself in a room filled entirely with cheese wheels. The Duchess of Aramore disappeared into a corridor that looped back to the same spot every 10 steps, leaving her dizzy. A bard strummed his lute while wandering through 17 doors in search of the banquet hall, only to emerge on the palace roof serenading pigeons. Meanwhile, King Eldrin tried to make his grand entrance. He strode confidently through a double door expecting the ballroom, and instead stumbled into the royal laundry. Startled servants dropped baskets of socks while Eldrin muttered, "Ahem, surprise inspection," before retreating. By the time he found the actual ballroom, half the guests were laughing so hard they could barely stand. But the funniest moment came when a mischievous young page decided to test the mystery doors. He opened one near the banquet table, and instead of a pantry, it revealed a lush meadow under a purple sky. Clearly not of this world. Out trotted a herd of fluffy creatures resembling sheep with wings. They bleated politely and began nibbling at the canapes. Guests screamed, laughed, and some even tried to ride the sheep, which floated several feet into the air like balloons. The court wizard, Old Master Fenwick, rushed to contain the chaos. He waved his staff dramatically, shouted incantations, and accidentally multiplied the winged sheep. Soon the ballroom was filled with dozens of floating woolly creatures, bouncing off chandeliers and carrying guests around like carnival rides. The musicians, deciding to make the best of it, switched tunes to a jaunty jig, and before long, the sheep dance became the highlight of the evening. King Eldrin, though flustered, saw the joy on his people's faces. "Perhaps," he said, brushing a stray feather from his robe, "the doors are not a curse but a gift. For what is a palace without a bit of mystery?" The guests cheered, raising their goblets, and even the sheep bleated in approval. By dawn, the palace had earned a new legend. Visitors no longer feared the endless doors. They came hoping to discover something unexpected. Some sought treasure rooms, others hidden libraries, and a few brave souls even looked for the door to the meadow of floating sheep. As for King Eldrin, he never quite mastered the art of navigation. But he learned to laugh at his palace's quirks, and so did everyone else. In Vera, people would say, life is like the palace of endless doors. You never know where you'll end up, but it's usually hilarious. Thanks for watching the AI animation. If you love this story, give it a like, drop a comment, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Welcome to the AI animation. If you enjoy funny and creative stories like this one, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join our growing family. The Palace with Too Many Doors. Long ago, in the kingdom of Belhaven, there stood a palace unlike any other. It had marble towers, golden gates, crystal chandeliers, and far, far too many doors. Nobody knew why the architect thought 1,000 doors were necessary, but he insisted, it makes the palace grander. At first it was impressive. Visitors would gasp, so many entrances. But over time, the doors became a royal headache. Servants spent half their day trying to figure out which door led where. Some doors opened to bedrooms, others to broom closets, and a few led to nowhere at all, just a solid wall. King Leopold, a practical man, hated the doors. Every time I want to go to the throne room, he groaned, I end up in the laundry chamber wearing someone else's socks. The queen had her own complaints. Last week, I opened a door expecting the garden and found myself face to face with a goat in the pantry. Things got worse during important events. Once, during a diplomatic banquet, the royal guests were led through the wrong door and ended up locked in the wine cellar for 3 hours. They didn't complain, though. They emerged very cheerful. Another time, a visiting bishop tried to find the chapel, but instead wandered into the royal kitchen, where the chef mistook him for a potato inspector. He spent an hour solemnly nodding at baskets of turnips. The final straw came when the king's grand parade was about to begin. Trumpets blared, drums thundered, and the people gathered outside to see their beloved ruler. King Leopold strode confidently toward the palace gates, but took a wrong turn. Instead of stepping onto the balcony, he opened the door to the royal laundry chute and slid all the way down into a basket of unwashed socks. The crowd outside waited patiently, expecting a majestic entrance. Instead, the laundry maid appeared, dragging the king out of a pile of stockings while he shouted, "Not this door again!" Fed up, the king summoned the royal architect, Sir Barnaby the Overly Complicated. "Barnaby," the king said sternly, "this palace is a maze. I demand a solution." Barnaby, stroking his long mustache, replied, but your majesty, doors are a symbol of opportunity. Opportunity to get lost," the queen snapped. So the king devised a plan. He ordered numbers to be painted on every single door. "Now we shall have order," he declared. The servants worked for days, painting numbers from 1 to 1,000. But this only made things worse. Nobody remembered which number went where. Guests were given maps so complicated they looked like treasure hunts. Then came the comedy of errors. The Minister of Finance announced, "The treasury is behind door 472. Unfortunately, door 472 led straight into the pigsty. The minister returned with a shoe full of mud and a piglet chasing him. The queen's ladies-in-waiting were told her chambers were behind door 833. They opened it and found themselves in the palace dungeon, face to face with a confused prisoner who asked, "Are we having tea?" Even the king himself wasn't safe. He tried to hold court in the throne room, but after 10 minutes of wandering, he accidentally opened the ballroom instead. The musicians, thinking it was a dance rehearsal, began to play. So the king gave his speech while waltzing. Finally, after months of chaos, the mischievous court jester offered a solution. "If the doors confuse everyone, why not make them useful? Let's hold the great door game." The king raised an eyebrow. "Explain," the jester grinned. "We invite nobles, villagers, even foreign guests. They pick a random door. Behind each one is either a surprise banquet, a treasure chest, or," he paused dramatically, "a goat." The idea was outrageous, but the king was desperate. And so, the great door game began. People came from miles around, eager to test their luck. Some opened a door to find mountains of cakes. Others discovered a hall filled with juggling performers. And yes, many unlucky souls found themselves nose to nose with a goat chewing on their cloak. To everyone's shock, the game became the most popular event in the kingdom. What was once a frustrating palace design turned into a grand entertainment. The king laughed harder than anyone. "At last," he declared, "my ridiculous doors have purpose." And so the Palace of Belhaven became famous not for its golden domes or marble halls, but for its endless, silly doors. And the people agreed. Sometimes the things that seem like the biggest problems can, with a little imagination, become the kingdom's greatest joys. Thanks for watching the AI animation. If you love this story, give it a like, drop a comment, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one.
The magical marketplace mayhem. In the bustling capital of Eldoria, there was a marketplace unlike any other. It wasn't just a place to buy bread or cabbages, oh no. This was the Grand Bazaar of Wonders, where merchants sold enchanted objects, peculiar creatures, and spells in a bottle. One stall sold self-stirring spoons that refused to stop once they started. Another sold carpets that flew only sideways, leaving riders dizzy and vomiting into the wind. There was even a tent where you could buy bottled laughter. Though once opened, it wouldn't stop giggling for hours. The king himself occasionally visited the market, disguised in a hooded cloak. Not for state matters, of course. He just liked to bargain over candied apples without everyone bowing in the way. One fateful morning, the market was especially crowded. The townsfolk jostled for bargains, the air buzzed with chatter, and a magician with suspiciously shifty eyes set up a new stall. His sign read, "Guaranteed magical deals, everything works, probably." Naturally, this attracted the curious. A farmer bought a bag of instant chickens. He poured it out at home only to find tiny chickens with the voices of opera singers. They refused to lay eggs unless he applauded their performances. A merchant bought a never-ending lantern. It did glow endlessly, but it also sang lullabies at full volume, making it impossible to sleep. But the real chaos began when the king's jester, always hungry for mischief, wandered into the stall. He purchased a small glass orb labeled "Wish Egg," crack for one surprise. The jester cracked it open in the middle of the marketplace. With a puff of smoke, out popped a donkey wearing a crown. The donkey brayed, "I am the true king." The crowd gasped. Some villagers bowed in confusion. The donkey strutted proudly down the street, kicking over baskets of fruit and demanding oats. When word reached the palace, King Alaric rushed to the marketplace, still in his dressing gown. "What is this nonsense?" he cried. But the donkey brayed loudly, "Bow before your ruler." The people didn't know what to think. Some laughed, others cheered, and one old lady tried to knit the donkey a royal robe. Determined to prove himself, the donkey marched to the cathedral. The bishop tried to shoo it away, but the donkey climbed the altar and brayed so powerfully that the crooked bell, you remember that one, rang by itself. The crowd roared with laughter. The situation spiraled. The Donkey King declared new laws. Free carrots for all. Afternoon naps required, no more shoe polishing. Children adored him, adults weren't so sure. The real king fumed. Finally, the royal wizard was summoned. He examined the donkey with a long beard-stroking session and said, "This is a curse of temporary kingship. It will last until sunset. Until then, we must obey." The jester cackled with glee, delighted that his prank had gone so far. The donkey paraded through the palace, sat on the golden throne, and demanded lullabies from the court musicians. The queen rolled her eyes and muttered, "At least he doesn't snore like my husband." At last, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the donkey yawned, sneezed, and transformed back into a regular farm animal. It blinked, looked embarrassed, and wandered off in search of hay. The people laughed for weeks about King Donkey the First. Songs were written, jokes were told, and someone even painted a portrait of the donkey wearing the crown, which the real king secretly hid in the cellar. As for the jester, he was locked in the dungeon for 3 days. But even there, the guards couldn't stop chuckling whenever they passed his cell. From that day on, the magical marketplace became both famous and infamous. You could find treasures beyond imagination, or end up bowing to a donkey. Thanks for watching the AI animation. If you loved this story, give it a like, drop a comment, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Welcome to the AI animation. If you enjoy funny and creative stories like this one, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join our growing family. The king who overslept in a majestic palace of marble staircases and golden domes lived King Roland IV, a ruler loved by his people, when he was awake. You see, King Roland had a tiny problem. He loved to sleep. No, not just enjoy a nap here and there. The man could sleep through anything. Trumpets, thunder, marching soldiers, even the queen's scolding. Once he even snored through his own birthday parade. One fateful morning, the palace buzzed with excitement. Today was special. It was the king's speech to the people, the grand annual event where he stood on the balcony, declared new laws, and waved dramatically while doves were released into the sky. Ministers rehearsed their bows, musicians polished their instruments, and the royal tailor ironed the king's robe. Everything was perfect except for one thing. The king was still in bed, At first, the servants whispered nervously, "He'll wake soon." They tiptoed around, carrying trays of breakfast, hoping the smell of roasted sausages would do the trick. It didn't. Then the court jester tried juggling in the bedroom, throwing torches and pies in the air. The king rolled over and mumbled, "5 more minutes." The queen stormed in, waving her fan like a sword. "Roland, you cannot oversleep today of all days," she scolded. He yawned, pulled the blanket over his head, and muttered, "Just let the doves go without me." Panic spread through the palace. The ministers argued about what to do. "We must wake him," cried one. "We must carry him out in bed," shouted another. "We could send a look-alike," whispered a third. Finally, the general suggested the big drum plan. Soldiers marched into the king's chamber with the largest drum in the kingdom. Boom, 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 the walls shook. The chandeliers rattled. The pigeons in the rafters took off in fright. The king, he snored louder. Then came the musicians. Trumpets blared, fiddles screeched, bagpipes howled. The sound was so terrible that even the royal cat fled under the bed. Yet King Roland dreamed happily of floating on a cloud. Desperate, the queen brought in the royal chef. "Cook his favorite breakfast right under his nose," she demanded. The chef fried bacon, roasted sausages, and baked fresh bread until the entire palace smelled like heaven. The king sniffed in his sleep, smiled, and rolled onto his side. Still asleep, finally the jester had an idea. If the king won't wake for duty, perhaps he'll wake for danger. He dressed up in a ridiculous dragon costume, barged into the chamber, and roared. Flames made of red cloth shot out of his fake mouth. The king sat up wide-eyed, then yawned and said, "Nice, dragon," before falling back onto the pillows. The ministers were ready to give up, but the queen wasn't. She leaned down and whispered into his ear, "If you don't get up this instant, Roland, I'm hiding the royal biscuits for a month." The king shot up like a cannonball. "What? Biscuits?" In a whirlwind of robes and bed hair, King Roland rushed to the balcony, rubbing his eyes and mumbling half his speech. The doves, startled by his sudden shout, flew in all directions. One landed on a minister's head, another stole the queen's fan, and a third refused to leave the balcony, staring at the king like an angry pigeon guard. The people below laughed and cheered anyway. "Long live the king," they shouted. Roland smiled sheepishly, waved, and whispered to the queen, "See? They don't mind a little nap." From that day forward, the king's people affectionately called him Roland the Restful. And while he never quite gave up his love of sleeping in, he always woke just in time when the queen mentioned the biscuits. Thanks for watching the AI animation. If you loved this story, give it a like, drop a comment, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Next story, The Wedding That Went Sideways. Once upon a time in the kingdom of Luminara, there was to be a wedding unlike any other. Princess Alara, known for her sparkling laughter and love of extravagant hats, was marrying Prince Cedric, famous for his perfectly combed hair and uncanny ability to juggle 3 apples while riding a horse. The preparations were grand. The ballroom was decorated with golden drapes, crystal chandeliers, and flowers that changed color depending on your mood. The chefs prepared a cake so tall it required scaffolding and safety harnesses, and the musicians practiced non-stop, determined to play the perfect symphony. Everything seemed perfect until the morning of the wedding. It began with the bride's dress. The royal seamstress, frantic from too much coffee, had accidentally made the gown 4 sizes too big. Princess Alara tripped over it repeatedly while trying to enter her carriage. The driver, a nervous man named Tobias, ended up using a broom to sweep her dress off the wheels before they could leave. Then there was the horse. The royal steed, Sir Prancelot, had decided he preferred the local bakery to the palace courtyard. He bolted mid-ceremony, dragging the groom across the garden in his elegant tailcoat. Prince Cedric waved valiantly, juggling 2 apples he had salvaged, and shouted, "It's fine. All part of the adventure." Meanwhile, the flower girls, twin sisters with an intense love of mischief, decided to improve the ceremony. They replaced rose petals with glitter bombs. As the couple approached the altar, a glitter explosion covered everyone: the king, the queen, the bishop, and even the royal guard. One guard sneezed, sending his helmet spinning into the wedding cake. The cake, already precariously tall, wobbled alarmingly. Guests gasped, and then it toppled. But that wasn't all. A rogue cat, attracted by the glitter, darted across the aisle. It leapt into the cake, sending frosting flying everywhere. The musicians played on, interpreting the chaos as a new avant-garde symphony. The bride and groom stood covered in icing, looking at each other and laughing uncontrollably. The bishop, however, was mortified. "This is sacrilege," he cried. A wedding must be dignified. But the couple ignored him. Princess Alara picked up a handful of frosting and flicked it at Prince Cedric, who retaliated with a glitter-covered flower. Soon, the entire wedding party was engaged in a spectacular frosting and glitter fight. Outside, the guests cheered, some joined in. Others took cover behind the golden pillars, laughing so hard their wigs fell off. Even the royal guards, trained for battle, surrendered to the fun, slipping and sliding across the marble floors covered in sticky icing. Then came the final twist. The palace pigeon loft, disturbed by the chaos, erupted in a flurry of pigeons, each carrying ribbons from the decorations. The birds swooped down, adding yet another layer of chaos. Princess Alara's hat flew into the air, landing squarely on the king's head. He remained surprisingly calm, declaring, "At least it matches my robes." By the end of the day, the wedding was completely unrecognizable. Guests were sticky, glitter-covered, and exhausted. The bride and groom, however, were ecstatic. They held hands, laughing until tears streamed down their faces, and declared it the happiest day of their lives. King Luminara, watching the spectacle, shook his head but chuckled. "Perhaps weddings aren't about perfection," he said. "Perhaps they're about laughter, chaos, and memories that stick, sometimes literally." And so, the wedding that was meant to be flawless became legendary. Songs were written about the glitter cake battle, paintings captured the flying pigeons, and the tale of Princess Alara and Prince Cedric's messy but magical wedding was told for generations. Thanks for watching the AI animation. If you loved this story, give it a like, drop a comment, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The Bishop, the King, and the Crooked Bell. In the bustling city of Marrowgate stood a grand cathedral, its spires reaching so high they seemed to poke the belly of the sky. Inside hung the Great Bell of St. Ambrose, a massive bronze masterpiece that was supposed to ring proudly across the kingdom during weddings, coronations, and festivals. But there was one problem. The bell was crooked. No one knew how it had happened. Some said lightning had struck it. Others swore a mischievous giant had leaned on it while tying his shoelaces. Whatever the cause, the bell gave out the most ridiculous sound whenever it rang. Not the proud gong you'd expect, but more of a glunk that echoed like a donkey hiccuping in a barrel. The bishop, a serious man named Father Benedict, despised the sound. "This is an insult to our holy traditions," he grumbled. "A bell should inspire awe, not laughter." The king, however, saw things differently. King Matthias was known for his sense of humor, and every time the bell went glonk, he laughed so hard he nearly fell off his throne. "It's delightful," he chuckled. "Why, it brings joy to the people," the people agreed. Whenever the bell rang, children mimicked the sound, merchants sang songs about it, and even bakers sold crooked bell cakes shaped like lopsided circles. The bishop, however, had had enough. He marched to the palace, robes swishing like angry curtains, and demanded an audience. "Your Majesty," Father Benedict declared, "the great bell must be fixed. We cannot allow our kingdom's dignity to be mocked by a donkey hiccuping sound." The king grinned. "But Father, the people love it. Just last week, a farmer told me his cows give more milk when they hear the bell. And I, for one, haven't laughed so much in years." "This is blasphemy," the bishop thundered. The king leaned forward slyly. "Tell you what, Father, if you can fix the bell, I'll allow it. But if you cannot, the bell stays crooked and we'll ring it at every feast, wedding, and market day." The bishop, confident, agreed. He summoned the best blacksmiths, carpenters, and even a retired knight who once claimed he could straighten mountains. They climbed the tower with ropes, hammers, and pulleys. The entire city gathered below to watch. The workers pushed, pulled, hammered, and prayed. Finally, with a great heave, they rang the bell to test it. "Glonk!" The crowd erupted in laughter. The king clapped until his crown slipped sideways. The bishop turned purple. "And try again," he barked, so they tried. They adjusted the clapper, polished the bronze, and even smeared honey on the edges. Nobody really knew why. They rang it again. "Lang lonk!" This time it sounded like a donkey singing opera. The people cheered. Children rolled on the ground in fits of giggles. The king was crying from laughter. The bishop nearly fainted. Desperate, Father Benedict tried one last idea: a blessing ceremony. He sprinkled holy water, muttered prayers, and waved incense around the bell. The crowd held its breath as he pulled the rope. Glunk, clunk, glow! The sound was so absurd that even the bishop cracked a smile, just for a second, before quickly hiding it with a cough. At that moment, the king raised his hand. Enough, the bell stays crooked. It is the voice of Marrowgate, unique and joyful. From now on, it shall ring not just for ceremonies, but for celebrations of all kinds. The bishop sulked, but the people rejoiced. Soon the crooked bell became famous far beyond the kingdom. Travelers came just to hear its silly tone. Musicians wrote songs to match it. One poet even declared, "A kingdom with laughter is richer than one with gold." And so every festival, the great bell of St. Ambrose rang out proudly. Glunk, glunk, and the people of Marrowgate laughed together, knowing that sometimes the strangest things bring the greatest happiness. Thanks for watching the AI animation. If you loved this story, give it a like, drop a comment, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one.
Vlad, the very clumsy vampire. In the quiet town of Moonvale, where mist clung to the cobblestone streets like a soft blanket, lived Vlad, a vampire unlike any other. Vlad wasn't scary, terrifying, or even slightly threatening. In fact, he was downright clumsy. While other vampires swooped silently through the night, striking fear into the hearts of villagers, Vlad tripped over his own cape, spilled his potions, and accidentally turned the neighbor's cat bright pink. Vlad's castle, perched on a hill like a gothic cupcake, was filled with ancient books, dusty relics, and an astonishing number of bandages. Why bandages? Because Vlad was always bumping into walls, ceilings, or occasionally himself. One night, Vlad decided it was time to host a grand vampire feast. Invitations went out to every vampire in the region. The menu promised delicacies like batwing stew, spider leg pasta, and blood pudding for those who liked it. Vlad was determined to impress. The first problem began when he tried to light the candles. With a dramatic swoosh of his cape, he missed entirely and set his favorite tapestry on fire. He panicked, throwing a bucket of water directly onto the prized coffin. The coffin lid slipped off, startling Vlad so much that he somersaulted into the buffet table, sending platters flying. Guests arrived nonetheless. Countess Carmilla, known for her perfectly coiffed hair and deadly glare, entered first. She stepped on a stray pumpkin, slipped on a spilled potion, and landed in the chocolate fountain. Vlad hurried to help her up, only to knock over the chandelier. It swung like a pendulum above the startled guests. Then came Count Drago, who, upon seeing Vlad in his awkward tangle with the chandelier, said, "You call this hosting? My pet bat does better party tricks." Vlad blushed, or at least tried to, which looked more like a pale shade of pink. During dinner, things went from bad to hilarious. Vlad attempted to carve the batwing stew. He swung the knife like a master chef, but missed the bowl and chopped a loaf of bread, which ricocheted into the portrait of his great-great-grand vampire, leaving a tomato sauce mustache. Not to be outdone, a young vampire guest tried to show off by disappearing in a puff of smoke. He reappeared, inside Vlad's hat, screaming. Vlad's loyal but anxious bat, Binky, swooped in to help, only to knock over a tower of goblets. The resulting crash sounded like an orchestra of broken glass. By the time dessert arrived, the feast looked more like a battlefield. But Vlad refused to let it ruin the evening. He raised a goblet of sparkling blood punch and said, "To friendship, feasts, and flawless chaos." The guests laughed, realizing that Vlad's clumsiness somehow made the night more fun. Stories of spilled potions, flying loaves, and pink cats would be told for generations in the vampire world. And then, the grand finale, Vlad attempted a dramatic transformation into a bat, as any self-respecting vampire should. He leapt into the air and crashed through the window, tangled in the curtains, landing in the pumpkin patch below. The villagers who had been peeking from their windows erupted in applause. They thought it was a performance. From that day on, Vlad was known as Vlad the Very Clumsy, a vampire whose heart was bigger than his grace. Young vampires admired him, not for fear, but for his ability to turn disasters into laughter. Even Countess Carmilla admitted, "He may be clumsy, but he's unforgettable." And so, Moonvale became famous, not for terrifying vampires, but for the funniest, most chaotic vampire gatherings anyone had ever witnessed. Vlad continued his misadventures nightly, tripping, slipping, and occasionally glowing pink, while everyone around him laughed along. Thanks for watching the AI animation! If you love this story, give it a like, drop a comment, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one.